We really like working with clients who want to meet their purpose, grow their purpose in anything where marketing can add to people's quality of life, or as we say, marketing for good. Welcome to our Marketing for Good podcast. Today we're interviewing Liz Duus from Vision Australia. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet across the country. We're on Gadigal land, and extend my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So Liz, welcome. It's great to have you on the podcast. And the first thing that we'd like to ask you about is a little bit about Vision Australia and your role there.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Carolyn. It's really lovely to be here. And I'll just acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners where I am, the Wurundjeri people. So my role at Vision Australia as Client Insights and Research Lead is largely focused on ensuring that the client voice is amplified throughout the organisation, and through various modes of client engagement. We work to understand what clients are needing, what their experiences are, what their priorities are, and we feed that into strategic projects, service design projects and things like that. So, yeah.
Very important.
And more broadly, Vision Australia is a national organisation that provides services for people who are blind or have low vision. I think generally people probably associate us with things like learning how to use a white cane or using a seeing eye dog, but we actually have a very broad range of services that we provide people. Everything from occupational therapy for independent living in the home, speech therapy for as part of our paediatric interventions, all the way through to our Vision Australia library, which has a huge plethora of audiobooks. So we service a really broad range of Australians, so through the entire life cycle, and in a large range of areas, so metro, regional, and now also remote, very remote sort of communities too.
I suppose the shift to more people being more comfortable with video calls like Zoom and so on, I presume that's helped your ability to service and provide services for people in more remote areas.
Absolutely. I think one of the benefits of COVID was that sort of increasing comfort and familiarity with the telehealth kind of mode, and we definitely have increased the number of services that we can provide via telehealth, and the uptake has been really positive. And it's a really useful tool for particular types of appointments and interactions with clients. So, yeah, definitely seen a big change in that area.
I was going to ask you, what would be the number one product that people think about you for?
Oh, tough question. I think probably our seeing eye dogs are at forefront of people's minds. I think, it's easy to kind of capture an audience when you've got a gorgeous little puppy or, a handsome Labrador. But yeah, it's a little bit harder to kind of tap into the minds of other people, but, with our other types of services, which are sometimes more difficult to sort of quickly describe. But I think that's probably, it resonates the most, those topics.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And Vision Australia has been around for a long time. I don't know exactly how long. You might be able to tell me, I'm not sure. But what are the most important current trends and changes that are really impacting the organisation?
Yeah. So Vision Australia has a very long history over 100 years even, and it is the product of many mergers and changes over time. And I think in the last decade, the biggest change for us has been the shift to a more individualized funding model via the NDIS, and also the shift towards the My Aged Care funding structure. So those have had the greatest impact on our organisation, and really pushed us into a space where we had to become much more commercially focused. I think traditionally, sort of, this is probably true with other not-for-profits and charities, like there's been block government funding that was really predictable, and you could kind of count on it, and there was a lot more. I think that the charities of old sort of just gave everything and whatever they could without kind of having to think too much about the commercial impacts. And NDIS has completely shifted that landscape for, I think, many not-for-profits in Australia. So
that's really interesting to hear.
Mm.
How far along the journey do you feel you are? Do you feel like you're sort of well on the way, or is it still really challenging?
I think that we've definitely established, we're at a point where our systems and processes are at a point where we can kind of have a lot of faith in them, and that we understand the system inside and out, and we can have confidence in how we're interacting with it. But I think there's constant sort of changes occurring with the NDIS and what they will and won't fund. And there's also, there's a real piece of work that we are responsible for, which is making sure that clients' needs are sort of accurately represented at that government sort of ministerial level and heard, so that feeds into the NDIS system itself and what does get covered. So we kind of have we've got two sort of responsibilities there. It's not just that service provision within the framework of NDIS, but also pushing forward the advocacy agenda for the community. Yeah. So,
that's really interesting. There's a couple of things that you've mentioned that we might come back to in a minute when, talking about the commerciality of the organisation and having to change. But I suppose just before we move on to that, how's the demographic changed and the sort of profile of the people that you work with? I presume with an ageing population that has had an impact.
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. With an ageing population, we know that vision loss generally follows a trajectory of, as you get older, there is more prevalence in the older age groups. But it has meant that, more than 70% of our clientele are now aged over 65. So it's a huge focus for us. And yeah, it's also been about, I think Vision Australia has also recognised that in other demographics, we are underserving the population and need to kind of adapt. And in particular, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander clients are an area that we feel is a real gap for us to close and to address. So we're working really hard at that one at the moment, and we've got our reconciliation action plan. We're about to move into a Innovate wrap now, which it sort of puts a lot of onus on us to make sure our service delivery model is culturally appropriate. And so those are two key demographic areas that the older adults and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, that we're really focusing on. Yeah.
Can I digress for a minute? Because I know you just recently went and did a visit to Alice Springs.
Yeah.
Was that in part related to the growing focus trying to orient services around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander needs?
Yeah, that trip was a couple of weeks ago. We went up and spent a week in Alice Springs, and we have an occupational therapist who is integrated with the Aboriginally controlled community health organisation there. She's been there for a couple of years now, and it's sort of been a pilot site for us to begin to understand how to deliver service in remote communities, and to build that capability in the organisation around culturally safe and responsive services. but that trip was also, it was really focused around working with local people, local elders, and having conversations about what people know about vision loss, how people feel about it, and what sort of messages resonate with local people the most, and getting their direct input was absolutely the best way to do it. So we feel a lot more advanced in that journey now, having had that opportunity. Yeah,
Would have been amazing.
it was fantastic. Beautiful place.
Yeah. I was going to ask you a couple of questions about your purpose. Perhaps it's self-explanatory, but what's the purpose of Vision Australia?
Our purpose and our mission is to support people with blindness or low vision to live the life they choose. And it is absolutely core and sits across the entire organization and is sort of embedded in a way that I probably haven't seen in another organization. And I think there's a number of reasons for that, but a lot of it is to do with we make a real effort to keep the client voice present in the organization. We have a client reference group who are at the same level as sort of subcommittees of the board. So they are in a sort of a respected position, and they're consulted regularly around projects, issues. We're always trying to tap into clients to understand what's going on with them, and also have them tell their stories on, instead of us sort of speaking for them. We're really all about them driving and representing themselves as well. So there's a number of ways, I think, that that mission feeds through everyone's day-to-day lives in the business.
It's always so interesting to hear how purpose plays out in organisations, because it is different. It really varies.
One of the other things VA does really well when you enter the organisation, we go through a really solid induction phase where we learn a huge amount about blindness and low vision, what it's like to work with someone, the types of supports that they access, and the simple adjustments that get made in the workplace to make it accessible. And we get skilled up in understanding our clients in some depth. And that sort of reiterates that focus again and that mission for us, I think. Yeah.
Well, strong induction, it sends a message, doesn't it, of what's important in the organisation.
Yeah. What are the that's right. Yeah.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier about how you've really had to become a more commercial organisation, and part of that was around the funding model, moving from block funding to NDIS. And I think you also mentioned the importance of your systems and processes. But how easy is it to be successful commercially and to also be true to a strong purpose?
I'm not sure I'd say it's easy. How easy? I think it's a really challenging sort of thing at the moment. I think a lot of businesses are up against that. The ways that I see the organisation successfully doing that include there's this real transparency around our commercial position. So there isn't sort of this hidden, unknown sort of aspect. It's regularly, quarterly updated on our commercial position by the CEO and the CFO. They're sharing with us where we're at. And I think that creates a sense of shared responsibility. I think it is forever going to be a challenge of charities to remain commercially safe and also mission focused. But I think if you can get your staff to understand that if we're successful commercially, then we're going to be here for the long haul, and that those two things go hand in hand, then it makes it a little bit easier to achieve that goal. One of the really cool internal campaigns we did a couple of years back was the Head and Heart campaign, just for internal staff to sort of just realign people's focus, because people were adjusting to this new culture of financial focus. They'd been working in this charity sort of space where you would just say yes to everything for clients. And it's not that we don't want to say yes to things, it's just that we want to do it in a way that we're supporting ourselves to be financially sustainable. And so that head and heart, the head being the finance and the heart being the mission, was a really great way to sort of get people to shift those perspectives. Yeah, I thought that was a good one.
Yeah. I was going to ask you if you've got any tips for other not-for-profits, but I think that's, that in itself is a great tip, that idea of engaging the heart and the head.
Yeah. Because you don't want to, it doesn't work. Well, the two things go hand in hand. You exist for both those reasons. Like you have to. So
definitely.
Yeah.
And purpose and values are different. What would you say is the role of your corporate values?
I think our corporate values, they were designed and implemented around the time that NDIS was entering. And they were really useful, I think, in helping people to understand the skills and the attitudes that we would need to thrive in this new sort of funding environment. So commercially focused is one of them, but so is person-centeredness. And that person-centered care is at the core of all of our service delivery. And then, another value is agile, and accountable is the other value. So it sort of also gives you this, like, we're all in this together. We've all got to be responsive to this moving, changing beast of a landscape. And but if we're all sort of, and so the fifth value is collaboration. So if we're doing it all together, we can probably achieve our person-centered sort of goals and also our commercial sort of sustainability. So I think, and those values are again inducted heavily and sort of reiterated through various sort of internal comms, and always referred back to by leadership as well. And I think that helps to maintain them, at the front of mind for our staff. And yeah.
They're not just on the wall.
No, they're not just posters, they're everywhere and they're talked about. And you know what I love about these things? It's like people make jokes even. They're sort of like, well, we've just got to be agile with this. But actually, it's in people's heads. They're not forgetting it. They're thinking about it all the time. That's great.
And maybe that's a benchmark of success. Once people can know the values so well, they can joke about them.
Yeah.
So we know that Vision Australia has a really strong commitment to being an inclusive workplace, but that can be easy to say and sometimes harder to implement in practice. So tell us a little bit about diversity and inclusion within your workplace.
I hear you, because it is so true. Like when you say it's easy to say but hard to do. We have a KPI, organizational KPI, to have at least 15% of our workforce coming from blind or low vision community. And this target is really useful. It's great, and but it's not as simple as just having that. There's also a variety of kind of processes that we use throughout recruitment that helps to, I guess, prioritize blind and low vision candidates. And then I think it's also about the next step, which is making your employment environment an accessible and inclusive place. So that kind of goes back to making sure staff have an understanding of the adjustments and requirements of someone with blindness or low vision, training people to announce themselves when they walk in the room, and simple things like pushing your chair in after you've used it so that someone's not going to trip over it. And, this is creating a safe and accessible environment. And I think that's something, it's those really practical things that actually enable that inclusion. And I think that's super important for organizations to understand. I think it's information that's not always readily available or easy to find for other employers. I think it's a real challenge that even our organization faces in achieving our employment sort of goals for clients. Building that knowledge in the broader community is, that's a big task and that's probably a pan disability sort of thing as well. Like, it's not just for blindness and low vision. So building that understanding of those adjustments, but also like having an understanding or having a shift in people's thinking about what's possible requires a level of education around what those adjustments look like, so people can understand it. Yeah.
It sounds like also, well, it sounds like there's a whole recipe for success, but it sounds like there's a planning piece as well and a thinking ahead piece.
Definitely. And I think there's that, there's the when you start to have those targets, you can see that there's a willingness, and there's that leadership commitment. And then you see sort of these other levels of inclusive employment happening, which are, sort of, educating yourself, educating other employees and building the culture. And then the physical, practical adjustments. And then I think another huge thing is accessibility in terms of digital systems and tools. There's another really big thing that I think a lot of employers might be a little bit unsure about, but there is support out there that can kind of take you on that journey. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Thank you. And it's a big thing to take on and commit to having a more diverse and inclusive workplace. And when you make a big change like that, you're not going to get everything right all the time. So how's Vision Australia gone about staying on the track, even though I'm sure from time to time things haven't, as you've tried to build a more inclusive workplace, maybe not every time has worked perfectly. What's the secret to keeping on going?
I think you kind of touched on it already. You've got to be willing to make mistakes and then willing to learn from them, and then iterate your approach, because, we are only humans, and so we will mess up, or things might not, one approach might work with a certain part of the organization, but you might need a different approach for a different set of kind of different cohort. So I think you have to just be willing to go through that process and be okay with that happening a few times. I don't think there's ever a perfect state, because, you get new employees, you get, things are always shifting and changing. But I think if you're, particularly your leadership, sort of committed to that, then that feeds down into your policy, and that sort of at least drives some of the changing behaviours that might be needed. Or, I just think that a willingness to iterate and try again is really important.
That's so interesting, because I think that's a skill probably more and more that's going to be something that successful organisations are better able to take a risk, make a mistake, learn, and be prepared to adapt and change. And that's certainly not easy in my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's about just learning to be uncomfortable. Learning to feel out of your depth, and that you're recognizing that that's an indicator that you're changing and growing. And I think if people can kind of take that sort of perspective, it might be a little bit less scary or something, but that sort of discomfort, it does resolve eventually. It's just initially, it's sort of like, holy, I'm just not used to this. Yeah. What if I make a mistake? Yeah.
I actually love that. The idea of learning to feel out of your depth as a sort of almost a measure. If everyone's feeling comfortable, maybe we're not doing enough.
That's absolutely, I think you're right. And I think there's sort of probably, there's a bit of a lesson in there, I guess. Like, it's, I won't go too far into my own personal experience, sorry. But I really, I think that's something that our organisation is trying to get people to be okay with, is just being uncomfortable is okay, having difficult conversations, it's all right. Like, it actually, it is an indicator of success that we are growing. So.
And have you got any tips for organisations that might be, in a similar situation but earlier in the journey, or, perhaps wanting to make a change and become more diverse or inclusive?
I think it depends on the organisation, but I do think at that executive level, everyone needs to be on board, and it needs to be, kind of agreed and embedded into something almost like a mission document, like something that, and I think that's actually can be a big step and a hard step for some organizations, because those parts of the organization are made up of people, and you really need some strong leadership to get the ball rolling, I think.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight, which I think is probably right. It's hard. Otherwise, it's very hard to sort of work against.
Yeah, it's a tough one to manage up on. It kind of, but I think if organizations are interested in building that capacity and starting that journey, there's a lot out there that you can access to support you. What
are some places to go and find?
Well, I mean, for me, like if generally there's just all these amazing advocacy organizations and agencies that will get you started on how to start the conversation with people in the organization. So if you're, if you're an executive and you're looking to sort of start to get those conversations happening, talking with people from those organizations can be really powerful, because they a lot of the time have lived experience themselves and like to hear employers saying, we think we're ready to do this. So where can we go and what can we do? So for Vision Australia, we have plenty of people that could advise an employer on how to become more disability confident, or what sort of existing government grants there are to support acquisition of the proper technology so that someone can do their job, or services around sort of creating or checking the digital accessibility of your platforms and your website and that sort of thing. It's really, I would be talking to those big organizations that have the lived experience and the knowledge within them.
That's a great tip. Thank you. Yeah, some of those big organisations have done a lot of work.
Yeah.
And as you say, also there's a lot of support, different advocacy organisations where people can get support as well. One more sort of question to ask you, which is a little bit slightly different to the diversity and inclusion, but we wondered how important sustainability and ESG are within Vision Australia, and if you've got any examples of initiatives that you might have.
Yeah, ESG is becoming more and more important for us. Like I said before, we've been using telehealth. We think that's a great opportunity to sort of reduce emissions and that type of thing, and cutting back on travel. We've also transitioned almost all of our fleet cars to hybrid vehicles, which we hope will have somewhat of an impact. And again, obviously that focus that we have around Indigenous service delivery sort of weaves into that as well. And our commitment to our new Innovate wrap is probably another example of those, ESG goals that we have in mind.
It's so exciting. It sounds like there's so much going on at Vision Australia, and it sounds like it's such a terrific place to work.
There is a lot going on. I think, we have a lot of strategic projects that we're pushing through, just to drive more impact and improve our services. So it's actually a really exciting time to be a part of the organisation.
Sounds like it. Yeah. Is there anything else you think we should cover we haven't talked about that you were thinking when you were preparing?
Oh, one of the things that we've done, just around the older adults that we're servicing. I just wanted to share this really cool program that we've recently piloted and just started rolling out. So as I was saying, like digital, our world is super digital now, and that's fantastic. But for older Australians that experience later life vision loss, what we've discovered through our research is if they have come to vision loss without very good technology skills, their adjustment to vision loss is slowed. Whereas if they do have good tech skills, they tend to, or good digital literacy, that adaptation to vision loss is a lot quicker. And that's been a really important finding for us. And, working out ways to build digital literacy for older Australians is really important. But one of the programs we've recently developed is in partnership with Amazon. And they've got the Amazon Alexa and the Amazon Echo, similar to the Google Home and all those sort of voice activated devices. So we issue clients, older clients, with a device, and then they undergo 6 weeks of training to learn how to access information, and do a variety of things at home, listening to music, whatever it is. And we've had such an amazing response to that. So that's a really exciting area of digital technology and assistive technology, really. It's voice activation is going to be a big part of our sort of how we support people with technology in the future, I think. So that's really cool.
I love that example. Because I love it's really based on one of those insights. We love research of insights, and then it rolls out to something so practical that can be so valuable for so many people.
Definitely, and it's a lot of what we do is just about finding ways to adapt, so that client can kind of easily access the world again, because it's a difficult journey, and reconnecting with people, for example, via these sorts of technologies is really beneficial for some people. They really respond to it, and
what a wonderfully positive example.
Oh, good.
And a great way to wrap up this really interesting and engaging podcast. So, Liz, thank you so much for your time today.
I think. Sorry if I rambled on a bit.
No, but I think I certainly found it thoroughly enjoyable and really appreciate your time. So, thank you very much.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thanks for having me. It was lovely to chat.
We really like working with clients who want to meet their purpose, grow their purpose in anything where marketing can add to people's quality of life, or as we say, marketing for good.